Who are the judges?
The whole room.
Okay. So we'll start. Am I good?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, to overcome.
My partners and I stand resolved that the United States federal government should ban assault weapons for civilian use. Justification 1 is mass shootings. Mass shootings. Mass shootings are on the rise in the United States according to the recent study in the Journal of Child and Family Studies. The Science Daily summarized the report as follows in 2018. More people have died or been injured in mass school shootings in the U.S. in the past 18 years than the entire 20th century. And the new study published in Journal of Child and Family Studies, researchers have reviewed the history of mass school shootings in the U.S. and found some alarming trends. Lead author Castanius of Clemson found the recent killing of 17 people at the majority Stanman Douglas High School in Florida is not an isolated occurrence, but part of a deadly epidemic that needs to be addressed. School shootings have been steadily increasing since 1979. Since the start of the 21st century, there have already been 13 incidents involving lone shooters. They've killed 66 people and injured 81 others. In less than 18 years, we've already seen more deaths related to school shootings than in the whole 20th century. One alarming trend is the overwhelming majority of 21st century shooters were adolescents, suggesting that it is now easier for them to access guns. The authors explained that such violence can be mitigated through a ban on assault weapons. Both Australia and the United States prove a decline in mass shootings caused by an assault weapon ban. Frederick Gamal, PhD, Criminology at Georgetown, 2015. This paper integrated data from a variety of sources in Australia and the US to produce the most comprehensive data set on mass shootings to date for the two countries, covering 33 years from 1981 to 2013. In the case of the USA, there was a moderate association between a decline in mass shootings and the temporary 1994-2004 federal assault weapon ban. The period following the cessation of the ban saw an increase in incidents and fatalities. In Australia, the implementation of the highly restrictive 1996 NFA coincided with the cessation of mass shootings events. The studies proved that the federal assault weapon ban caused a moderate decrease in mass shootings. Frederick Gamal, PhD, Criminology at Georgetown, 2015. The USA experienced at least one mass shooting in all but 4 of the 33 years between 1981 and 2013, with an average of 2.2 mass shootings a year. The increase in mass shooting incidents in the US between the 1980s and 1990s was sustained into the 2000s and again into the early 2010s. A moderate decrease in mass shootings coincided with the 1994-2004 federal assault weapon ban. Studies prove that both federal and state assault weapon bans have decreased mass shooting fatalities and injuries. Mark Geis, the Department of Economics, Quinnipiac University, 2015. The purpose of the present study is to determine the effects of federal and state assault weapon bans on public mass shootings. For the period of 1982 to 2011, it was found that both state and federal assault weapon bans have statistically significant and negative effects on mass shooting fatalities, but that only the federal assault weapon ban had a negative effect on mass shooting injuries. Woo. Justification 2. The danger caused by assault weapons justify their banning. The danger caused by assault weapons justify their banning. Assault weapons are more dangerous than other forms of firearms. Ejik Sawal, who serves on the House Judiciary Committee, comments in 2018, which is this year. The high-velocity bullet fired from an assault weapon moves almost 3 times as fast as a handgun. The bullets wreck a wider swath of tissue organs and blood vessels. More of these deadlier bullets can fire more accurately and quickly without reloading. An assault weapon is the handheld weapon of war, capable of spreading a crowd with lethal fire in just seconds. While only a small number of Americans own assault rifles, they were involved in a disproportionate share of gun crimes and fatal police officer shootings. Nicholas D. Kristof, a 2-time Pulitzer Prize winner, 2008. Assault weapons pose a serious threat to public safety and should be banned. While only a small number of Americans owned assault weapons before they were banned, these weapons were involved in a disproportionate share of nation's gun crimes. Refusing to ban assault weapons will only lead to the deaths of more Americans. Assault weapons, while amounting to only 1% of America's 190 million privately owned guns, account for a hugely disproportionate share of gun violence precisely because of their macho appeal. Assault weapons aren't necessary for any kind of hunting or target shooting, but they're popular because they can transform a meek and mild-mannered man into a vengeful Rambo. Assault weapons are still used in 1 of 5 fatal shootings of police officers. Assault weapons are a special problem. They accounted for 8.4% of the guns traced to the crimes between 1988 and 1991, and they are still used in 1 of 5 fatal shootings of police officers. Waffling on assault rifles will only mean more dead Americans. About 100 times as many Americans are already dying from gunfire in the US as in Iraq. Assault weapons are used against law enforcement agencies and have proliferated within drug and gang communities. Brian Roth, editor-in-chief of the John Marshall Law Review, 2013. Banning assault weapons aid in crime control and prevention. Assault weapons are unique firearms that are not used for sport as are many other lawful firearms. Assault weapons are strongly conducive to accurate and efficient spray firing. These firearms make it easier to kill. Justification 3, an assault weapons ban is consistent with the Second Amendment. An assault weapons ban is consistent with the Second Amendment. The fact that the United States had a ban on assault rifles for 10 years and there were no violations of the Second Amendment proved the opponent's concerns unfounded. Senator Bobby Joe Champion, 2018, again this year. Assault rifles are not used for hunting. We've heard from political opponents that banning assault rifles is a gateway to taking away our Second Amendment rights. There is nothing further from the truth. There are other ways for people to hunt or defend themselves without assault rifles. A ban on assault rifles is not in any way, shape, or form an attack on the Second Amendment. We banned assault rifles for 10 years from 1994 through 2004 without any infringements on the Second Amendment rights. The NRA want to sell more weapons. They exploit people's fears and tell them if we ban automatic weapons, we'll soon be banning all guns, including hunting rifles and handguns. Nothing can be further from the truth. A ban on assault weapons was in effect for 10 years in America. It didn't affect their Second Amendment rights, and it didn't cause a wave of anti-gun legislation. Assault weapon bans are constitutional under the Second Amendment, which is designed to protect self-defense. Brian Roth, editor-in-chief of the John Marshall Law Review, 2013. Assault weapons bans are constitutional, consistent with Heller's core holding. The Supreme Court's holding in the Heller was very narrow. We held that district bans on handgun possession in the home violates the Second Amendment, as does its prohibition against rendering any lawful firearm in the home operable for the purpose of immediate self-defense. Self-defense is undoubtedly at the core of the Second Amendment right. I hope that you can see we need a ban on assault weapons. Thank you.
I'll stand. You want to stand as well? Or no, we should sit. Okay. Can you define an assault weapon?
A weapon that is used for war.
So, does that include handguns that are used for war?
What handguns are used for war?
Okay. Second, this Science Daily piece of evidence says that these authors explain that bonds can be mitigated through expanded background checks, a ban on assault weapons, mental health issues, school services providing mental health supports. The affirmative does not include expanded background checks or mental health proposals to y'all.
What's your question?
The affirmative does not engage in mental health policies or any background check policies. It's just a ban on assault weapons, correct?
Why would that be?
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And then also Science Daily goes on to confirm about school shootings. Where in this piece of evidence does this talk about the prevalence of assault weapons used in these school shooting events?
In this piece of evidence?
Yes. It seems to be contextual to just gun violence writ large.
I think it presupposes assault weapons were used, like the past few school shootings, assault weapons have been used. I think there's like an empirical precedent for that. So even if the specific words in the evidence aren't quote unquote assault weapons.
You just have a stat.
What?
Just a stat, a percentage.
No, this article explains that such violence, like the school shootings, was mitigated through a ban on assault weapons. So since we banned assault weapons, the violence in schools has gone down.
Okay.
Cool. So how can we actually compare Australia's gun ban to the US and how it would be implemented or effective, considering that we are pretty bigger and a different culture?
The use of that article using Australia was to show the coincidence that Australia and the United States have used both these bans, and they've used a ban in both countries, and they've been effective in both countries,
The
showing that it's not
ban?
only in the United States but it's also
The
in other countries.
1994 ban?
Yes.
Those things are really cool. You can get them offline for pretty cheap.
Fantastic. They're on Amazon. They're called portable totes.
You can fold up the legs and put them up, and they're great. You can put them in a backpack. They're really helpful.
You can use Stanford Debate as a discount code. Joking.
They were taking it seriously. I was like, really? I didn't know we did that.
Alright, cool. Everyone ready? Cool. My partner and I stand against the resolution that the United States federal government should ban assault rifles for civilian use. We present 3 justifications. First, an assault weapons ban will not solve crimes. An assault weapons ban won't solve crime. Assault weapons are hardly ever used. Criminals use handguns instead. This is shown by Robert J. Caldwell, the former editor of the San Diego Union Tribune in 2008. Banning assault weapons in 1994 did not reduce gun crime. Studies show that criminals use pistols, not semi-automatic rifles, when committing crimes. Even before the federal ban, criminals rarely used assault weapons in their crimes. Law-abiding citizens should not be prevented from owning weapons that do not threaten public safety. The '94 ban proved predictably ineffective. Rifles of any type are used in only a tiny fraction of gun crimes, the preferred firearm for nearly all criminals being the handgun. The criminal use of rifles dubbed assault weapons is rarer still. Indeed, so-called assault rifles are the least likely firearm to be used in crimes. FBI statistics show that rifles of any description are used in only about 3% of homicides every year. Data put the frequency of assault weapons used in all violent crimes at 0.5%. And criminals will just use other guns. This eliminates the effect on crime. Lopez, senior reporter at Vox 18. When it comes to shootings in America, the use of an assault rifle is actually rare. Shootings with assault rifles make up less than 3% of gun homicides in the US. And according to federal data, handguns have over the past couple decades made up more than 70% of firearms used in homicides. Studies on assault weapon bans have generally ranged from inconclusive to unfavorably toward a ban. And even if the bans were effective at constricting access, they'd only have a small effect on gun violence overall. And other weapons are more effective than assault rifles at killing people. Sean Davis, an MBA from Wharton, 16. In 2014, you were 6 times more likely to be murdered with a knife than you were with a rifle. Knives were the weapon of choice in 1,567 murders in 2014. You were also nearly 3 times more likely to be killed by someone's fists or feet than you were to be murdered with a rifle. Knives are more deadly than rifles, so are fists and feet. It's an incontrovertible fact. The human desire to kill is far more deadly than any weapon. Restricting the use of those tools by innocent people who only want to protect their families is madness. And assault weapons aren't used in crimes. Jacobs and Berger from the NYU School of Law in 2015 stated that assault weapons are not crime guns. It has always been true that 90% of guns used to commit crimes are handguns. Assault weapons are rarely used in drug, gang, or street crimes. The most common assault weapons prohibited by the 1994 federal ban accounted for between 1% and 6% of guns used in crime. And the amount of firearms are not equated with the amount of crimes. From Robert Caldwell at the San Diego Tribune in 2008, more firearms do not equal more crime. The 200 million plus privately owned firearms in the US grew by an estimated 37 million during the 1990s. If this simplistic notion that more guns equal more crime and more homicides had any validity, crime rates would have climbed during the decade. Instead, rates for crime fell every year through the end of the decade. And justification 2. Assault weapon bans will be circumvented. Assault weapon bans fail because criminals will just modify the weapon around the ban. This is from Lopez, the senior reporter at Vox, 2018. The 94 ban was riddled with loopholes. To understand why, consider a surprisingly tricky question. What is an assault weapon and how do you define it? Defining what makes that an assault weapon can be difficult. Is it that it's semi-automatic? Well, there are semi-automatic handguns and hunting rifles too. Is it the high velocity? Traditional hunting rifles can also have these features. Is it the pistol grip that offers an easy way around the law? If someone could just remove a pistol grip, then it's no longer an illegal assault weapon. Gun manufacturers took advantage of this, producing modified versions of previous weapons to make them legal, blowing a big hole through the law. And assault weapon bans are easily circumvented. This is from Jacobs and Berger at NYU 15. Assault weapons can easily be assembled by purchasing parts for weapons separately. Indeed, many firearms aficionados customize their firearms by purchasing grips, barrels, and attachments separately. Thus, a New York resident, even after the SAFE Act, would have no difficulty constructing his or her own assault weapon. And assault weapon bans are easily to circumvent because of the definitions being so vague. This is from Plumer at the New York Times in 2012. What counts as an assault weapon? The trouble also starts here. There's no technical definition of an assault weapon. They are fully automatic weapons. Then there are semi-automatic weapons that reload automatically but fire only once each time the trigger is depressed. Semi-automatic pistols and rifles come in all shapes and sizes and are extremely common in the US. Congress didn't want to ban all semi-automatic weapons. That would ban most guns, period. So in crafting the 94 ban, lawmakers mainly focused on 18 specific firearms. And justification 3. Assault weapon bans trade off with other forms of gun control. The current focus in on who should possess the weapons, not what type of weapons they should possess, is the more effective approach.
Gurney and Parsons at the Center for American Progress in 2014 stated, while the question of what to do with the proliferation of certain military-style rifles, so-called assault weapons, remains open, advocates for stronger gun laws have recently focused on the question of who may possess guns rather than which types of guns should receive heightened regulation. This shift in focus to prevent dangerous people from accessing guns is appropriate. A broad set of research suggests that more measures are effective in reducing gun violence. There is an overwhelming support and an opinion poll for expanding background checks and similar measures aimed at restricting dangerous people from accessing guns. And an assault weapons ban would trade off with better gun control policies. There's limited political capital for gun policies. It would be better to focus on popular gun measures that have more impact. This is from Lopez at Vox in 2018. Other gun proposals could do more. The popular support March for Our Lives has put forward other proposals. Its official 5-point plan calls for more gun violence research, strengthening the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, and universal background checks, on top of its demand for assault weapons ban and ban on high-capacity magazines. Based on their empirical research, it might be more prudent to focus on other policies which target all types of guns. In a world with limited political capital, the assault weapons ban's limitations are an important part of the discussion. And while bans on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines do have 65% plus support in Pew, they face far more opposition from Republicans than other measures, and therefore would struggle to get through Senate process than they would require bipartisan support. And bans on assault weapons only waste precious political capital. This is from Jacobson Berger at NYU. A majority of Americans favor banning assault weapons. I find it surprising that gun control proponents like the Brady campaign to prevent gun violence continue to expend political capital.
All right, go ahead and sit down.
Alright, we can stand, it doesn't matter. First question I have for you, what bills are going through the Republican or introduced into the Republican-controlled Congress right now that would in some way increase restrictions on weapons?
Yeah, so right now we're seeing things like the Brady campaign are trying to promote a lot of the policies like the affirmative proposes, which are relatively unpopular with Republicans, and so the affirmative is just another instance of
So is the Brady campaign a law right now?
No, it's a campaign that's like lobbying for
and
certain policies.
If it's unpopular with Republicans, then it's not going to pass anyways, right?
Well, I would assume that the affirmative, says that it passes and then claims all of their impacts based on that.
No,
And based on that,
We're
it
talking
makes their political
specifically about the
capital.
Brady campaign.
No, the Brady campaign is just an example of the rule, which is that Republicans,
Alright,
writ
so-
large, oppose assault weapon bans.
But this campaign will somehow translate into restrictions on gun use. Is that what you're saying?
We're saying that we should, instead of wasting our political capital on plans like the affirmative, instead we should focus them on certain campaigns to limit who can access guns, to increase mental health screenings, background checks, and all of those other necessary factors to make gun use more safe, not necessarily ban it.
So where do we see those campaigns or that legislation right now that the affirmative is going to affect?
Yeah, so I think that you actually might have the piece of evidence that says it, but it was the third or second piece of evidence within justification 3.
Okay. Question, does evidence quality matter in debates? Just a general question.
I'd say that we can have the qualifications debate during the 2AC, the 3A, or the 3AR, whatever that
Okay, cool,
is,
so
the
we have to wait
2MC,
till the
the
last speech to
3MC.
see what you'll say?
No, we have 4 speeches. Like,
Okay.
what do you mean? There are 4 speeches left. It's a great time.
Okay. Sarah, you gonna ask your other question?
So what kind of modifications are they using to circumvent the policies?
Yeah, justification 2 is really good on this, about how they just made their own guns, some DIY stuff, and then also just removing what was legally prohibited to make it legal.
Oh, that's right.
It's your speech.
Isn't it? Yeah.
You're just looking at me and I'm like, alright.
How much prep time do we have?
3 minutes.
Okay,
Are y'all taking prep?
y'all want me to take prep?
Sounds like it. That's a prep question. I'm gonna start 3 minutes.
Okay, fine. Y'all have anything you want me to say, add in specific? Okay. Alright, cool, we had 210 left. Wait, what, Jamie?
I was like, how long is this?
I think it's 6 minutes.
It's all good.
Nathan looked me up.
Yeah, Nathan's the only one who's actually like on this. Okay, cool.
Do you want this?
Do I want it?
Sure.
I think I do.
Yeah.
Okay. Partner ready? Opponents ready?
Yeah.
Cool. In 2018 alone, there have been 26 mass shootings, mostly with assault rifles. There have been 233 mass shootings total. In 2012, there was a Sandy Hook school shooting. 20 children died. In 2016, there was the Orlando shooting. 49 casualties, or deaths, and then more casualties. In 2012, there was the Aurora, Colorado shooting, and 12 people died. In 2012, there was the Las Vegas shooting. 58 people were murdered. In 2018, there was a Parkland school shooting. 17 people died. These are just a few examples of school shootings and types of violence that assault rifles perpetuate. Most of my opponents' evidence is dated. Their first argument was that banning assault weapons was not sufficient to quell crime. Their piece of evidence is from 2018. You should prefer the statistics that I just read. I would extend our first argument that mass shootings can be prevented through ban on assault rifles. Our evidence is from Science Direct Daily. It's a peer-reviewed source, which you should prefer over their evidence. Our next argument was great. The fact that Australia and the U.S. have both implemented assault weapons bans, and it's proven and statistically proven to decrease shootings. You should prefer over their Lopez evidence. Their next argument was that other weapons are more effective. Their evidence is unable to produce a single. The examples that their evidence uses are fists and knives. There's not a single mass shooting or incident that their evidence articulates which correlated from someone getting in a fist fight. Also, their evidence, if qualifications matter, is titled "The Assault Weapons Ban is a Stupid Idea Pushed by Stupid People" at thefederalist.com. It doesn't have any qualifications. It's not somebody who you should prefer on this question. Their next argument is that the weapons ban will just get circumvented and that weapons will be modified. Even if you think that's a persuasive argument, we think that the ban will still be largely effective and quell the majority of these incidents and keeping them from happening. Our statistical evidence is better on this question. Their next argument is that people will just purchase separate attachments, but that's a lengthy process. It also requires that you have a certain amount of expertise, which most people who commit crimes may not possess, especially considering that they made the argument about mental health. Most people who perpetuate that type of violence are just using readily accessible weapons. This will solve for that. The next argument they made is that assault weapons trade off with restricting bans on other types of weapons, but they were unable to articulate a single measure that would be put in place absent the plan passing through. Also, even if you think that there are loopholes from the 1994 legislation that allow for some weapons to slip through, the plan at least strengthens that and improves upon the past legislation. We're going to be able to learn from past mistakes. Also, even if there are some types of weapons that it does allow, even if there are some types of weapons that you think could still perpetuate forms of crime, there's a very big distinction between assault weapons, which can fire about 600 rounds per minute, and other forms of weapons that can fire usually maximum, like a lot of their evidence is in context of long rifles, which can only fire about 90 rounds per minute, and that's even if you have to be a pro and super efficient at changing out cartridges. So in that time period, there are lots of intervening actors that could come and check. The police could come in that time. There are many lives that could be saved, which proves that the ban would at least help from a timeline perspective. The next argument that they made was that better gun policies could be put through, but they weren't able to articulate a specific piece of legislation. They just gave an allusion to a campaign. But in a GOP-controlled Congress, it's very unlikely that the current Congress would pass this type of legislation, which is very anti-gun. So it's unlikely that this campaign would transform into any type of proactive policy measure. They were unable to give a specific example, which is why you should prefer the plan. Is there anything you want me to say, Sarah? I think we're good.
I think you're good.
Okay, cool. Ready for cross?
No cross after
There's no cross after this.
There's no cross after this. It's so weird.
Wreck you.
What?
I'd wreck you.
Wow, that was impressive.
6 minutes.
Excellent.
Wait, what did I say?
Are the judges ready? Are the opponents ready? Jamie? Yes. I'm going to be going the negative case and then I'm going to respond to the affirmative case, just in case for a roadmap. We on the negative agree with the vast majority of the affirmative claims in this debate round. Yes, there is a gun violence issue in America, and yes, it's crucial that the United States develop comprehensive policies to be able to remedy these issues. But the nexus question of this debate round is comparing the affirmative's methodology of a pure ban on assault rifles versus the negative's proposal to institute stronger background checks, regulations, and mental health policies that help eliminate the root cause of the issue at hand. We have offensive reasons why a ban on assault rifles just generates things like black markets and gets circumvented. As Milton Friedman, the famous economist, stated, by banning an industry, you merely make it a monopoly for the cartels. And we have seen this effect on banning in the industries replicate itself both in the Prohibition era and in the current failed war on drug policies. A vote for the negative, however, is a vote to devote resources to broader background checks and mental health proponents that their own evidence states is necessary and sufficient to be able to remedy the majority of the harms that the affirmative isolates. The first contention of the negative is that the impact to the affirmative is vastly outweighed by other types of gun violence, such as handguns and mental health issues, which the negative believes that we solve better. Our Lopez evidence indicates that 97% of gun violence in the United States comes from handgun policies and mental health issues that do not use assault rifles. And again, I would like to harken back to cross-examination of the 1AC, where I asked for a clear definition of the assault weapons. They didn't really provide me one. What they did say was that weapons that are used in war, I don't really think that that is a definition of an assault rifle. It's 100% not supported by their evidence. The larger point, though, that I would like to draw from cross-examination is just the confusion and inability of laws to write stringent enough regulations to avoid the type of circumvention. This also demonstrates that a vote for the negative is a larger impact in this round, because in order to be able to solve for issues like mass shootings and dangerous weapons, we need to institute broader background checks and other things to solve. The second is our circumvention argument. This is an offensive argument that says the affirmative makes the status quo worse by just generating black markets and the inability to sufficiently regulate assault rifles in the status quo. While imperfect, at least allowing assault rifles to be a legal market ensures that there is a certain amount of regulations, gun titles that we're able to trace, and that ideally other types of broader reform bills could regulate better instead of a pure ban. Our Lopez evidence is fantastic, though, that says that empirically proven there were massive amounts of loopholes in the old assault rifle ban. It incentivized people to alter their guns in ways that were not easily noticed by the industry, and it just resulted in a more vicious black market that made crime harder to solve. I'll do some evidence indicts on the affirmative's evidence in a bit, but I would like to point out that the vast majority of the affirmative's evidence recommends also banning the manufacturing of assault weapons and instituting a buyback program, none of which the affirmative does in their plan text, which merely bans the use of assault weapons for civilian purposes, which means you still have Smith & Wesson pumping out ARs. It's just a big question of where they're going, and at least in the status quo, we have receipts that are accessible and over the counter to check. The third argument is key, is that background checks are better. Our evidence is fantastic. A scholar of research, Ryan Galloway, cut phenomenal articles that stated that there's bipartisan support in the status quo for broader background checks and to solve things like media health and access to other types of situations. Our evidence also indicates that with the upcoming midterms, Republicans and Democrats in whole are looking for moderate, reasonable, bipartisan commitments, and things like broader background checks are widely supported by both parties. Our evidence is phenomenal, though, that's saying that instituting an assault rifle ban in this moment would make dead on arrival any other types of background check bills or mental health bills, because there's limited political capital in Congress to be able to get through a bill, which means that at the end of this debate, if you feel like it is a better bet to vote on broader access of questions of mental health and who can access a gun rather than a pure assault rifle ban, which would increase access to the black markets, then you're going to vote negative. I'd just like to refute some of the negative, I'll go to the affirmative's case and refute some of their evidence. On the mass shootings contention, their first piece of evidence about mass shootings is demonstrating cross-examination is not in the context of assault rifles. It also demonstrates that health policies and background checks are key. They mentioned Australia. They didn't provide any evidence about the feasible, coherent nature of whether policies in Australia are compatible, and their evidence still said that there are mass shootings due to things like assault rifles, which should make you be thanks to handguns, which should make you be skeptical of that test model being able to solve. Their second point about assault rifles are dangerous. Their Swalwell evidence says we also need to ban the manufacturing of them and institute a buyback program, none of which the affirmative does, which magnifies our circumvention arguments because it means that there's still $1 billion industry pumping out guns that are only going to be able to go to criminals. And their third and final point is that it's permissible under the Constitution, the Second Amendment. That's fine. Just because something can happen doesn't mean it should happen. And the broader issue in this debate is whether we should endorse the affirmative policy of just a pure ban on a myopic and vague term like assault rifles, or we should promote broader background checks. And the last thing I'd like to say is that they said their Science Daily evidence was a peer-reviewed study. I beg to differ. It just says Science Daily and then has a URL. It doesn't cite who did the article, who did the peer review. So I beg to differ when they say their evidence is peer-reviewed. We also quote law professors, and overall, I think the evidence quality is phenomenal on both sides, but ours is just a bit better on background checks being the better strategy. I think it's like 53 seconds remaining.
All right.
We don't, yeah, 53 seconds.
No, it doesn't matter. That was,
Yeah, that's the last speech.
Oh, that's your last. Oh, we speak last. Okay.
You guys want to steal
Still
our
have 53
It's 4 minutes.
seconds. Okay, well,
I'm not crazy.